This is the Angry Birds Bird Minute, sponsored by Angry Birds for their 15th anniversary, where we tell you all about a cool bird that may or may not be angry. This week's bird is the Dracula parrot. With its distinctive black and red feathers, you might expect to find this large parrot in a Transylvanian castle, but it's found exclusively in the hills and mountain slopes of New Guinea. Another reason for their spooktacular common name is their vulture-like appearance. Much of their head lacks feathers, giving them an eerie look that you wouldn't associate with most parrots. But are they angry? With a name like Dracula parrot, you might expect these birds to be a scary vampiric monster, but you won't find Dracula parrots drinking blood. These birds feed almost exclusively on figs, and their lack of feathers is simply to ensure that all that sticky fig juice doesn't make a mess of their plumage. On a scale of 1 to angry, we rate the Dracula parrot as misunderstood.
This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
And today we're going to talk about one of life's great enduring mysteries
That has finally found resolution. We are really excited about it. It's a tale as old as time, perhaps one could say. One that was quite a fixture in the group a little bit ago and still I see pinging around on the internet, was about how eels, specifically a couple eels in the genus Anguilla, reproduced, because apparently for a really long time no one knew how it happened. Like literally thousands of years no one knew about it, but then as of 2022 they have made some discoveries and I was like, this sounds like it's fake, but it's not, so we're going to talk about it.
The history of this question, how do eels reproduce, has some really funny twists and turns, because for a long time people didn't know at all, and they had some really wild theories. Like Aristotle didn't know, Pliny the Younger, all these people from way back have written about their ideas of it. And then even 1,000 years ago, more recently than that, people have had some pretty funny ideas about eels, like you could eat them during certain times when you couldn't eat other meats in Europe because they were considered pure, because Europeans thought that rather than reproducing like a normal animal, they actually just emerged from the earth as adults, not knowing where they came from. And we can all laugh at them for being wrong in their old-fashioned-y sort of way, thinking of spontaneous generation and thinking that frogs just fall out of the sky when it rains and that kind of stuff. More recent people, so in the 800s, Sigmund Freud, when he was a grad student, spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, couldn't do it, couldn't even find the male reproductive organs at all, which seems oddly linked with the rest of his career.
Yeah, they don't tell you this in school. This is what spawned the rest of his psychology. They don't want to teach you that. It's not written in any textbooks, but you have to source. Dude, trust me, the eels were his white whale, and then so he just changed paths completely.
He just gave up. He's like, you know what would be more easy to figure out? The human brain. And then more recently, even now, the last couple decades, people have started tracking down where they reproduce. And then from there, I think Io will pick it up on the latest updates in this literally millennia-long quest to figure out where eels reproduce and how.
And this was however many years ago, a couple years ago, that it was a big thing in the group. Was a lot of people were saying, maybe people were making memes about it. People would submit memes that would have like moray eels in them. But there are many different types of eels, mostly saltwater, but sometimes freshwater. There's an order called Anguilliformes. Forgive me if I have mispronounced the Latin, and some demon in your house or car, wherever you're listening to it. My apologies. That are the true eels. And there's a couple hundred species, but the ones that we are talking about are mostly called freshwater eels, even though they do go into saltwater, called the anguillids. And of those, there's 20 species or so. The three ones that are most popular are the European eel, the American eel, Anguilla rostrata, and the Japanese eel, Anguilla japonica. And for a long time, people thought that they didn't even realize that the young of this eel was the same species as the adults, because they look so crazy different, which like sometimes happens with dinosaur fossils. They think, oh, this baby Triceratops is a different species. And they're like, no, it just goes through like crazy changes as it goes up. For a long time, people like would dissect them and not find any sexual organs. No one witnessed them reproducing or anything. So people were like, I don't know. And then eventually in the 20 teens, like 2015 maybe, don't quote me on it, they put some transmitters, like trackers on the eels to track where they go. And they go into the Sargasso Sea, which is like in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean near the Bermuda Triangle, which only makes this spookier, you ask me.
So specifically, they put the trackers on European eels.
Yes, correct. They put the trackers on the European eels. And yeah, the European and the American eels both go into the middle of the Sargasso Sea. I don't know if they have tracked the Japanese eels, but presumably they don't swim around the southernmost tip of South America, all the Sargasso Sea, and go back.
They're
Who
not
knows?
taking the Northwest Passage over to the Atlantic and back in their life. Crazier things have happened. So just for those who have never heard of it before, the Sargasso Sea is actually one of the coolest geographic entities in the world because it's considered a sea, an enclosed saltwater body of water, but it's not enclosed by land. It's enclosed entirely by ocean currents. It's this area in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where there's circular currents all around it, but not a lot of movement within it. And because of that, this huge mass of algae and seaweed accumulates there, and all kinds of animals, not just eels, go there. For example, a lot of sea turtles, after they hatch, we've just learned this in recent years, also make their way to the Sargasso Sea and they spend their time there. It's called the Sargasso Sea after the sargassum, which is the seaweed that floats along it.
Which in Florida, that sargassum washes up on the beach a lot of the time, like when seaweed and stuff comes in.
We get covered in it sometimes.
And as a kid, I was always like, oh, whatever. But then I got older and learned sometimes because so many creatures like to live in the sargassum that like sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe something got washed ashore with it. So far, I have been unsuccessful, but all sorts of like little tiny critters make their home in it. So not unheard of for them to accidentally wash up on shore with it.
It's a lot like, did you ever watch Life of Pi?
Yes.
It's a lot like a slightly less cool version of the meerkat floating island that they had in that story.
That island was scary because when I read the book and it was like the flower or the bud and it opened it and there was a tooth inside, that just sent chills down my spine and I like had to put the book down for a second. I don't know what about it. I haven't pinpointed exactly what it was, but I was like, it was just so sinister because it was presented so innocently. And so all of a sudden having this spooky, I don't know, implication in the middle of something so idyllic.
So I didn't envy a lot of that story, but when he was on that island, all I could think about is, man, I would love to see that. That would be so cool.
Yeah. All you have to do is get washed out to sea in a lifeboat, be stuck for a really long time.
With a tiger.
Concoct a mental storyline for yourself to keep yourself from going insane. Just like easy peasy, simple as that.
Yeah, no problem. Totally worth it.
Totally worth it. There's actually a ship leaving right now. We could get you on it. Leaving to the Sargasso Sea to see the eels, and that's when you fall off. And you fall off the ship that sinks on the way to go find the eels, and then you float into them and you see them in real life, and that's what happened.
Is that how they discovered what the eels are doing in our story today?
Yes, definitely. No. And also one of the reasons that no one knew how they reproduce is because they would dissect them and not find any sex organs, but it's because they don't sexually mature until they're like between 7 and 25. Like it takes them quite a while to mature. And then after spawning, they die. You're not gonna see them if you're just chilling in Europe because the eels are going on a tropical vacation to live it up and then die, like the cicadas do, the periodical cicadas that are a buzz, if you will. But then a couple of years ago, they had been able to observe them breeding in a laboratory setting. They had given the eels hormones, and so their sexual organs developed, and then external fertilization, where the females released a bunch of eggs and the males released a bunch of sperm, and they just fertilized them in the open water, like frogs do, lots of other fish do.
Right.
But that was in a laboratory induced setting, so they had never observed it in the wild. And then eventually they put the trackers on the European eels, tracked them to the Sargasso Sea, and they were like, all right, the eels are hanging out here. So they were like, okay, this is the place, but we have yet to observe the act. But then in 2022, a paper was published that they had actually observed this in the wild, which was crazy because that was about the same time that this was catching on in the group. And I was like, what are the odds that this has been a question for thousands of years? And we just happen to be alive at the time that it's figured out, but also having a meme resurgence about it at the same time that this discovery is kicked off. It's like learning about a mystery that's been going on for 1,000 years and then someone being like, oh yeah, I solved it. You're like, what are you talking about?
It's definitely the biggest case of instant gratification I've ever seen from our perspective.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Everyone in ancient Greece and everyone is like, are you kidding me? I spent my whole life studying this. Like, and you guys get to find out immediately.
It's part of the bit. They had to wait all that time so that it would be funny.
It's true. You have a friend who like starts a show when the show starts and watches it episode by episode, but then you get into it later so you could just binge watch everything. They're like, you have no idea how long I spent as I was agonizing in between episodes and between seasons. You just have to watch 6 seasons in a weekend.
It's just like that. Something that's really interesting to me about this is that they're basically the opposite of salmon. So salmon,
Yes.
They spawn up in the top of a freshwater body. They spend the very beginning of their life in freshwater, go out, live in the salt water for their like middle adult years, come up, spawn in the river and die again. So it's pretty crazy to me that there's another set of fish that will start in the ocean, go into freshwater for a little while, and then go back out in the ocean.
Yeah, which I think there's a word for fish who transition from either saltwater to freshwater or freshwater to saltwater. I can't remember what, and there's the word for each of them. But I remember like when I was a wee child, I was like, okay, yeah, they like swim for salmon. I was like, oh yeah, they just swim back to the rivers where they were born. No big deal. But then as I got older, I was like, no, the ability to tolerate saltwater or tolerate freshwater requires very different physiology in any animal. And so for the fact that these fish undergo these changes is huge.
It's a big change.
It's a big change because when you're in saltwater, you have to deal with keeping your levels of salt and the levels of salt around and not having too much salt, too little when you're and usually they might have, special systems of getting rid of excess salt. But then if you take a saltwater fish and you put it in fresh water, they're like, this is bad. All the salts will leave them, which is why I think it's funny in Animal Crossing when you can release fish into whatever water body. So I'm like,
No.
I'm like, this is not right. So if I like caught a whole bunch of sea bass and I was like, fuck you, I was looking for like a shark or something. And as a little bit of revenge, I'm like, I'm going to release you into the river and you're going to have a bad time. And there's nothing that happens in the game mechanic, but I felt a little bit better.
I don't know. Have you ever re-caught any fish that you've released into the river?
They haven't told me that you caught me. So who knows? Maybe if I released them close enough to the mouth of the river, they swam their way out and then I caught them again. But should they introduce tagging animals into Animal Crossing? Put it in the comments below. I think that would be fun.
I think that'd be great. We need to get Nintendo on the line.
We should make all of the wildlife techniques. We should make a game. How fun would that be?
It'd be awesome.
Could be like a mist netting game where if it was like a real-time fishing game where you just have to do a lot of sitting and waiting. But then if you catch a bird, then you have to move your controller or whatever in a specific way to detangle it. And then you can you added a new bird to your logbook. Da-da-da-da.
Did you ever play the game Surgeon Simulator when you were a kid?
No, but I did play Operation, which with the buzzer, so I imagine it's similar.
Similar. Well, it was this weird flash game where it had the surgeon's hands in front of the screen and you had to control their hands, but each finger and each knuckle had a different button that controlled it. So it was almost like going back to being a baby and not knowing how anything works, and you have to coordinate your whole hands to do things, and usually you would just murder the patient. But I imagine that delicately pulling a bird out of a mist net would be very similar in a video game.
You would have to make it for minimum psychological damage so that it was perhaps a little easier than...
True.
Or a VR game. That could be fun.
That would be really cool. I gotta say, Surgeon Simulator was not a fun game. So I don't think we should go down that route in game design. But
it does make me think stuff where there's like a game where you have to be responsible for lots of little things. It does make me glad that so many things in my body work on autopilot. Like when I walk, I don't have to think about individually moving every single muscle in my body when I walk. Otherwise, I'd get nothing done.
And if you start thinking about it, it screws you up.
You start thinking about how you're breathing. You start thinking about where your tongue sits in your mouth. You're thinking about how often you're blinking. You're welcome, everyone. That's my gift to you.
You start thinking about yawning.
Thinking about yawning. How many times you're swallowing. Yeah, the list goes on and on.
By the way, the names of the fish. So a fish that starts in freshwater and migrates to the ocean to mature, then goes back to freshwater to breed, like a salmon, is called an anadromous fish. And then the opposite of that, a fish that starts its life in saltwater, migrates to freshwater to live, and then back to saltwater to breed, that fish is called catadromous.
I was thinking of semilparity and iteroparity. Semilparity is something like a salmon, which has one highly focused about reproduction. Like salmon put all of their effort to this
Oh,
one
sure.
spawning thing in their lives. Versus iteroparity or iteroparative breeding, you will have multiple breeding events throughout your life. So like a lot of octopodes who they'll lay one clutch of eggs and then they die afterwards. That's semmelparous reproduction. So I guess that's what these eels are doing too. They have one big party in the tropics and then they're like, goodbye. And their young have 5 different stages of life.
Yeah.
And they look super, super different. One of the stages, they're called glass eels, which is one of the ones that they thought were like a different species just because they're really small and skinny and see-through. So they were like, this is obviously a different species. But no, it turns out they just look crazy.
And at that stage, I was looking at pictures. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I really like the pictures of the small animals when they're in their planktonic life stages. So a lot of fish or just a lot of ocean animals, wherever they end up living in their adult life, they have a free floating larval stage where they're so small and so see-through and they hide in the open ocean by just being really small and see-through. But different researchers have different ways of photographing them. And they're so cool because, of course, they're mostly see-through, but some things like any bones or if they've eaten any food, you can see their digestive tract. And it's almost a stencil or like a line art version of a fish. And they often look way different from their adult counterparts. And I'm like, you're so crazy. Look at you go. Like, you're so cute.
It's really wild because you really, on land, you mostly think of insects as doing something like that, of having such a wild difference between the juveniles and the adults. For the most part, animals we interact with day to day, they pretty much are born looking like they look as grown-ups, just a little cuter. But fish, it's like wild, the differences.
Yeah. If you've ever seen a baby lobster, it looks nothing like an adult lobster. A baby sunfish, a baby mola mola looks nothing like an adult mola mola. And so I think that's really neat.
Me too. I'm looking up lobster larvae now.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. That looks it looks like a crab. Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Or like like a cephalopod? I don't know. That's bizarre looking. So it's round. So it has a round, clear body with like little eye stalks on one end and then many legs arranged all around it like a flying saucer. It looks almost like a clear, pretty spider with goofy, googly eyes on top.
That is a great descriptor.
Wow, I didn't know about that at all.
Yeah. And so I remember seeing some pictures and being like, what is it? Like, never in a million years, if someone was like, guess what animal this is, would have been able to guess it.
No, I might have thought it was literally like an octopus.
Yeah. But for these eels, what's also crazy is they go on a super long migration. So for the European eel, some of the individuals cover almost 5,000 miles, which is about 8,000 kilometers. It's 4,900 miles, approximately 8,000 kilometers to reach their Sargasso Sea from Norway, for example. And scientists believe that they use Earth's magnetic field. Yeah, they drift along. Yeah, I found another article I found says that they found that the larvae always drift along paths of increasing magnetic inclination and intensity, and adults follow reverse gradients.
Interesting.
Which is crazy. Also to imagine to being like a teeny tiny eel larva and having to swim anywhere when you're microscopic, like that's huge.
You know what else that makes me think about? The Earth's magnetic field flips every so often so that what's the North Pole now will be the South Pole and vice versa. I wonder what happens to all these animals that use it for navigation when it flips. Do they all start going in the wrong direction?
I don't know. And I've thought about that. And I think it's every really long time, which also they can track it in the Earth's crust. Because when like undersea volcanoes at spreading boundaries of the plates, the new rock that is formed is in line with the Earth's magnetic field. And when it flips, the new rock that is formed is in line with that new flip. There's basically stripes and bands, not visible, but to various sensors that you can see, okay, it's every, I don't know, 10,000 years or something like that, or 100,000 years, there's these alternating bands. So yeah, I don't know if it would just the opposite if it would throw the animal world into chaos. I know there was an episode of Doomsday Preppers where one of the doomsday scenarios that someone was prepping for was like the poles flipping. I was like, I don't know. I don't know how much that would affect the human or the animal world. Probably more than we would realize or think of, just because we take for granted how much the magnetic field affects things, but also B, don't know how much the magnetic field affects things because we just haven't figured it out yet. So
I bet it would be a big news story and some things would happen, but then life would go on and we just flip our compasses the other way.
yeah, I'm like, you just cross off the N and you write the S, and you cross off the S and you write N.
And you tell all the sea turtles to do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm looking up mag field flip. As often as every 10,000 years or as infrequently as every 50 million years.
Interesting.
And the last reversal was 780,000 years ago.
Man, so much weird stuff happened since humans have been around. There were people then.
780,000 years ago?
They weren't like our species, but there were hominids then.
I always say, if someone's like, if you could go back in time, like, what would you see? And I'm like, I want to like speed run like Cambrian, ideally first life on Earth up until the dinosaurs, because like I want to know the T. But also if I could be like, okay, from the beginning of life to the end of the dinosaurs, which a long period of time, but also if I could hang around for when the Earth's magnetic field switched each time, that would also be pretty cool, because I would like to see what happened.
Well, until that happens, or until a week passes, that's our show. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/wildgreenmemes. That's memes with an M. Until next time, I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
And happy Year of the Raccoon.
Raccoons have been knocking over my compost bin. They've taken it too literally.
It's their year. Give them some slack.